Today on the Matt Walsh Show, Democrats vote down a measure to prohibit men from women's sports. Not a single Democrat was willing to break party lines and take the side of sanity and common sense. Also, the mayor of Boston tries to do some PR cleanup after offering her heartfelt condolences to a crazed assailant who tried to stab random people. A Hollywood actor shocks the world by expressing a desire to have more than 1.5 kids. And this year's Best Picture winner has sparked another conversation about quote-unquote sex work. The director and star of the film say that we need to be allies to prostitutes. What does that mean exactly? We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. Tonight, Daily Wire Backstage returns live for President Donald Trump's address to Congress, and we're covering it like never before with Ben Shapiro and myself live from D.C. Don't miss the exclusive pre-show at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, followed by the full address completely uninterrupted. When he's done, we're back with a breakdown of what it all means. Watch with us tonight at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus. What you do online is not private, far from it. Data brokers, the savvy collectors of big tech, are tracking and creating a profile of your online activities, your spending habits, even your values and beliefs. And in the U.S., they are legally allowed to sell that information to whoever wants to buy it. That means big corporations can buy and sell your info to feed you more advertisements. Tech companies like Facebook can use your info to determine what kind of content you see. It's a subtle way that they try to turn us all into followers, but there's a way to push back and hold on to your values and your autonomy and your freedom, and that is with ExpressVPN. With ExpressVPN, 100% of my online activity is rerouted through secure encrypted servers, which makes it impossible for my internet provider to know what I'm doing online. I personally use it every time I travel for work. It gives me peace of mind when I know that my sensitive emails and financial information are safe, even on sketchy hotel or airport Wi-Fi. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, preventing data brokers from identifying you online, tracking your activity, or building a profile to sell. ExpressVPN is easy to use. It just takes one click, and it works on all your devices, on up to 8 of them, all at once, in fact. So right now, you can get an extra 4 months for free when you use my special link. Go to expressvpn.com/Walsh. Get 4 extra months of ExpressVPN. That's expressvpn.com/Walsh. One of the things you're generally not supposed to do when you're in the commentary business is draw any sweeping conclusions about public sentiment based on reading YouTube comments. You can't usually review YouTube comments and determine how people generally feel about something. But there's been a trend lately across various comment sections that at this point you simply can't ignore. If you pull up news reports about Republicans' efforts to ban men from competing in women's sports, you'll find in every single instance, without exception, that the comments overwhelmingly support the Republicans. Even if you go to the channels of left-wing news stations, the pattern remains the same. And not just on YouTube. Read the comments under any article on the topic, anywhere. Read the comments on X or Facebook or Instagram. There is everywhere on every major platform wide agreement on this issue. There just isn't any debate among reasonable people about the topic. Everybody is tired of seeing men dominate women's sports by pretending to be women. Take, for example, this footage from NBC News report last month. It's about a bill that passed in the House, which would codify one of Donald Trump's executive orders. The bill is called the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. And the terms of legislation are pretty simple. It would ban any school that receives federal funding from, quote, permitting a person whose sex is male to participate in an athletic program or activity that is designated for women or girls. And the bill goes on to define sex as solely on a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth. Just in case there was any doubt about that, that's what sex means. Now, this is the kind of legislation we need to see more of. It's a meaningful step by Republicans in Congress to give some backbone to an executive order that's very important. And with that in mind, here's how NBC News covered the House vote on this legislation back in January. Watch.
The House passing a bill that would ban transgender girls and women from competing in women's sports. The legislation would impact transgender athletes in federally funded schools, grades elementary through college, and would result in a school losing funding if violated. Transgender students in sports became a top issue on the 2024 campaign trail and now a top priority of House Republicans in the new Congress.
Now, right away, you could see that they're framing this legislation as a bill that would ban transgender girls and women from competing in women's sports. So they're not reporting the truth, which is that transgender girls and women, quote unquote, are men. They're not going into any detail about how obviously unfair it is for men to compete against women in sports because they are men. Instead, they're trying to portray this law as some kind of mean-spirited, bigoted effort by Republican lawmakers and so on. And even on NBC News' YouTube channel, which has a very left-leaning audience, obviously, this framing did not fly. Instead of condemning the ban, pretty much every single comment supports it. For example, the top comment reads, "Can't believe this is even being discussed. Common sense is underrated." And then someone says, "Finally, the nonsense ends." And another user replies, "As a woman and mother of a girl, I'm happy and grateful." I can go through about a dozen other videos like this. Forbes, for example, has a similar video. One of the top comments puts it this way: "As a former Democrat, even if I'm liberal on certain subjects, it's dumb S like this that has driven me and a lot of other folks away from this party. Embarrassing." And again, every comment is like this. So the pattern is familiar. Left-wing media outlets try to portray the Republicans as the villain of this story, and despite the framing, the comment section revolts. And none of this is surprising when you take a look at the polling data on the topic. Just a couple of weeks ago, a New York Times poll found that, quote, "The vast majority of Americans, including a majority of Democrats, don't think transgender athletes should be permitted to compete in women's sports." Roughly 80% of respondents said that men who identify as women should be banned from women's sports. And among Democrats, the number was 67%. And by the way, 80% agreement is, it should go without saying that 80% agreement in this climate, these days, where we can't agree on anything, a fractured culture that's fractured in a million pieces, to get 80% agreement on anything is almost impossible. That's as wide an agreement as you could possibly get on anything. And that's what you have on this issue. So it might as well be everyone. 80% is effectively 100%. When you consider, where we are in the culture. And just to put these numbers in perspective, something like 4% of Democrats voted for Donald Trump in the last election. This is a demographic that disagrees with Trump on pretty much everything. But when it comes to the farce of men competing in women's sports, even most Democrats are forced to agree with him. Most. In fact, a wide majority. And that's why the vote that just took place in the Senate is so remarkable. Every single Democrat in the Senate, all 45 of them, every single one just voted against the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. In other words, 100% of the Democrat Party in the Senate still endorses the insanity of men competing against women. There was not one single defector. For all we hear about there being certain Democrat politicians who are, the good ones, the reasonable ones, they're not the crazy ones. None of them showed up this time. Every single one came out in support of men and women's sports, despite the overwhelming number of voters, including Democrat voters, who are tired of this nonsense. In spite of that, Democrats in Washington are in complete lockstep on this issue, and they're proud of it. So this is footage of Elizabeth Warren casting her vote. And to give you some idea of how the day went, she makes sure that everyone sees that she's giving the big thumbs down for the cameras. This was so confusing that, I went looking through the floor debates on this bill. I wanted to know what exactly could motivate the party of democracy that loves democracy so much to flagrantly disregard the clear desires of their own voters. I wanted to see what arguments they put forward. And I came across this speech from Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois. And here's how it began. This is Dick Durbin's argument for why the Senate should not pass a bill that bans men from competing against women in sports. Here it is.
I also want to say a word about what we're going to vote on today, an issue that's going to come before us. I might ask my colleagues if they could answer the following question. How many athletes, NCAA athletes, are there in the United States? I asked Mr. Baker, former governor of Massachusetts, that question. And he said over 500,000. 500,000. And I said, of all those athletes, what percentage are transgender? Oh, fewer than 10. I said, fewer than 10%? No, fewer than 10 total out of 500,000 are transgender. And yet we're going to come to the floor with a proposal from Senator Tuberville to vote on this issue.
Okay, so according to him, it affects basically no one, so why wouldn't you support it? What's the argument against it? What's especially funny about this line of argument is that Durbin supported Democrats' anti-lynching law a few years back. As you may remember, the Biden administration made a big deal about signing that bill, even though lynching and all other forms of murder, outside the womb anyway, have been illegal for some time in this country. So somehow the fact that no black people have been lynched in several decades and the fact that it's already illegal on like 5 different levels to do it did not deter Durbin from supporting that law. But now we're supposed to conclude that because there aren't thousands of men playing in women's sports, the whole issue is moot. And this is the stock argument you hear all the time from trans activists. Of course, even assuming that Durbin's numbers are accurate, which of course we should not assume that, is almost certainly more than 10. But still, this is an argument that completely sidesteps 2 very important issues. The first is that women are indeed losing opportunities and being degraded in order to affirm the delusions of pathological narcissists. That's not something we should allow, regardless of how many women are being affected. It doesn't matter if it's 10 or 10,000. The other issue, of course, is that a functioning society has to be able to accept the reality of basic human biology. Even if you don't care about the injustices that athletes like Riley Gaines have endured, and you obviously should care about those injustices, then you still have to explain some basic terms. You have to explain, for example, what a woman is. You have to explain what a man is. And as we all know, Democrats are incapable of doing this. This is why the women in sports issue matters so much. It's not even about women's sports specifically. At least that's not the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is one of truth, basic truth. And that's why it matters. Now, I want to play the rest of Durbin's speech because he eventually gets around to making another argument. And in some ways, this is even more revealing than the last one. Here it is.
The bill, which has no enforcement mechanism, could subject women and girls to physical inspection by an adult if someone from an opposing team accused them of being transgender. Think about that for a second. Your daughter, someone in your family, going to play a sport, and someone on the other team challenges them. That's not a little girl, that's a transgender boy. This bill that we're about to vote on gives authority to someone to make a physical inspection of that little girl if someone from the opposing team accuses them of being transgender. Does that sound a little extreme to you? Well, it sure does to me too.
Well, I went back and read the legislation that he's talking about, and contrary that he himself has obviously not read, contrary to what Durbin says, there is nothing in the law that permits a random adult or any adult to look at the private parts of a student athlete who's accused of pretending to be a woman. So what he's saying is that Republicans are secretly obsessed with this kind of perversion when in fact he's the only one thinking along these lines. That's not what Republicans are thinking about. This is what you always get from Democrats is, oh, you want to run into the locker room and check people's genitals. That's you. That's where your mind goes. That's the way you're thinking, okay? No one on the side of sanity is saying any of that. That's entirely your own imagination. So this is maybe a window into the sordid mental state of Dick Durbin and Democrats like him. In reality, the bill simply bans men from competing against women. That's it. That's it. And everyone understands exactly how that would be enforced because it's extremely painfully obvious when men are playing in women's sports. You don't need any kind of examination. You don't need to test their chromosomes or do blood tests. You just look at them. Okay, in every single case involving a man playing in women's sports, that has been true. It has never been a close call. So when Democrats say, well, how could you possibly know? How could you know if that man is really a woman? I don't know. You can know just by looking at them for a second. I can look at them for a second from 100 yards away, and I can tell, okay? Just like everybody else can. It's not fooling anyone. That's how we know. Of course, Democrats like Dick Durbin have to pretend otherwise. They'll watch a basketball game and see one athlete towering over everybody else, a foot taller, gigantic Adam's apple, twice the muscle mass, James Earl Jones voice, and they'll conclude that there's just no way of knowing the athlete's gender. You put a wig on Shaquille O'Neal, and there'd be no way, he could be a woman. There's no way. How could we possibly know whether that's a man or a woman? They act like it's a mystery known only to perverted gender inspectors who are going around pantsing student athletes at every opportunity. But even though Durbin's side of this argument was in the minority, Democrats have succeeded in killing the legislation. That's because laws like this one have to overcome a filibuster, which requires 60 votes. And because the vote on this legislation was 51 in favor and 45 opposed, it won't pass. Republicans have the majority, but they're not able to pass a law like this one, which has the wide majority support of the American people. And so it's enough to make you wonder why Republicans don't eliminate the filibuster just entirely at this point. We all know Democrats will do the same thing the moment they have the opportunity. They've done it before, after all. And if Democrats are now so unhinged and so unreasonable that they're willing to defend the idea of men playing in women's sports, then it's safe to say the filibuster has drifted very far from its original purpose. The point of the filibuster was to enable careful deliberation. That was the point. Instead, at the moment, it's enabling insanity. And it's enabling the Democrats to stop a bill that almost every American agrees with. So getting rid of the filibuster would also make it much easier to pass this and also pass a federal ban on child castration and mutilation in the name of so-called gender-affirming care, which is something that I've obviously been pushing for, especially since the beginning of the second Trump administration. And a couple of days ago, one of the most prominent Republicans in the Senate, Josh Hawley, endorsed my proposal. He wrote, quote, "And not just this, but when is Congress going to give victims of these transition surgeries and treatments the right to sue the people who carried them out? Needs to happen now," close quote. This is the kind of legislation that Republicans need to enact as quickly as they possibly can. Whatever procedural roadblocks are in the way just need to be cleared. When Democrats are using the filibuster to obstruct the will of the vast majority of Americans, of 80% of Americans, including their own voters, it's a very clear sign that the filibuster needs to go. It has outlived whatever usefulness it allegedly had. And once the filibuster is gone, we need to start passing laws that affirm the reality of basic fundamental human biology. For the benefit of all young people and to restore some semblance of sanity in this country, we now have no other choice. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. Nothing says peaceful slumber quite like waking up feeling like you've been in hand-to-hand combat with a pile of discarded metal springs that have personal vendettas against your spine. Luckily, that's where Helix Sleep comes in. I never realized how badly I needed a new mattress until I finally got one. My Helix mattress always supports me, supports my body the way it should, and I'm sleeping straight through the night for the first time in years. The best part is waking up actually feeling refreshed instead of dragging myself out of bed. What makes Helix different is that they don't just sell you a random mattress. They actually customize and match you with the perfect one for your body and sleep style. Whether you're a side sleeper, back sleeper, or somewhere in between, they've got you covered. Helix has a sleep quiz that'll match you with your perfect mattress in under 2 minutes so you can get better sleep and better start to each day. Trust me, when you find the right match, you'll wonder how you ever slept on anything else. Right now is actually the perfect time to upgrade your sleep because Helix is offering an incredible March Madness sale. Go to helixsleep.com/Walsh to get 20% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/Walsh for 20% off site-wide. helixsleep.com/Walsh. Yesterday, we talked about the psychopathic mayor of Boston who offered her heartfelt condolences to a man who was killed by an off-duty cop after he tried to stab a bunch of random people outside of a Chick-fil-A. And Mayor Wu, Chairman Wu, as I've seen some people online refer to her, which I kind of like, Chairman Wu was deeply upset by this turn of events. She wishes that the crazed stabber had not been killed. She wishes that he was, I guess, able to carry out his stabbing spree because that's his right. That's the right of, we know that according to Democrat mayors, mentally ill vagrants have a human right to inflict whatever carnage they want for as long as they want until they get tired. What should stop somebody from stabbing people to death is just when your arm gets tired. That's what should stop them. But as long as they have strength, they should be able to stab as many people as they want. That's basically the position that these Democratic mayors have and Democratic DAs and, every elected Democrat in the country. So there was a lot of backlash after these insane comments from Chairman Wu. And now here she is yesterday addressing the backlash.
What do you say to those types of critiques, her critique and those online?
It's unfortunate to politicize being at the scene of a tragic incident. Our officers are in extremely difficult and dangerous situations every single day, keeping our residents safe. And I express condolences along with our police commissioner and district attorney because every loss of life is a horrible tragedy. I'm also grateful every hour of every day for the work of our Boston police officers. And in this case, we had an off-duty officer who saw something happening, his training kicked in, and took action and surely saved even more lives.
Every loss of life is a horrible tragedy. No, it's not. No, it's definitely not. The loss of life, when we lose someone who's trying to stab people to death, that's not a horrible tragedy. That's the opposite of a tragedy. That's good. Okay, I'm happy that he's dead. If I lived in Boston, I'd be happier. Like if I could choose between having a crazed person who tries to stab people, if I could choose between them being able to walk around free or be dead, I prefer dead for them. That's what I'd prefer that. And that's obvious to those of us who are sane people. Now, as a reporter points out next, she and as the conversation goes on, she didn't say any of this at the time. The bit at the end about how the off-duty cop was a hero and he saved lives. She didn't even she didn't call him a hero, I don't think, but she at least acknowledged that he saved lives. She didn't say that the day before, right? When this happened, she didn't say that. She did not praise the officer at all. She did not acknowledge that he saved lives or express any, relief about that fact. She didn't say anything about his heroism. She spent more time mourning the dead assailant than she did praising the officer because she is, again, a psychopath. But let's go back again to what she said to justify all this. She says that any loss of life is a horrible tragedy. And here's the thing. If she actually believed that, which is not true, not every loss of life is a horrible tragedy. The horrible tragedy on 9/11 is not that we lost the 9/11 hijackers. It's everyone else who died, right? If somebody is killed in the process of trying to murder innocent people, the tragedy is the innocent people if they were killed, not the guy. But if she actually believed that, if she really valued all human life and valued it so deeply that she even mourns the loss of a guy who was trying to stab people at a Chick-fil-A, if that was the case, then you could almost give her a pass. But it isn't the case. And here's how I know that it's not the case. Watch this.
Across the country, we see that access to women's reproductive health care is under attack. People think that we're leading the way on access to care as we are in so many other areas, but the fact is we're not.
Women seeking abortion are making a deeply personal decision, and that conversation should be between the patient and her doctor. Our laws are getting in the way of that conversation.
I don't think that it should be a mass decision or a political decision. What I can and can't do for my family in my body.
Massachusetts, we have to do better. Healthcare decisions should be made between a patient and her doctor.
That was Michelle Wu a few years ago appearing in a video to advocate for the Roe Act in Massachusetts. That's a law that did eventually pass in the state, which enshrines the right to an abortion at any stage of development. It enshrines late-term abortion. Okay, and this law allows minors, children as young as 16, to get abortions without parental consent. Now, Michelle Wu, of course, supported and advocated for that law. She is a far-left Democrat, which means that she is a vocal proponent of abortions for everyone at every stage up to the moment of birth and probably beyond it. And everyone includes children without parental consent. I mean, just think about that for a second. Think about a 16-year-old girl, and this is happening right now in Massachusetts and in other states, a 16-year-old girl going to an abortion clinic and consulting with an abortionist without her parents being involved at all or even aware that it's happening. Who do we trust to have a child's best interests at heart in this situation? The parent or the abortionist? Who's more trustworthy? Who's more likely? Who is more likely to care about this child? Well, Michelle Wu trusts the abortionist. She's never met an abortion that she didn't like. She's never met an abortionist she didn't trust. And so in that scenario, when you've got an abortionist who has a financial incentive is going to charge hundreds of dollars, going to make hundreds of dollars off of this transaction, financial incentive to do the abortion, we're supposed to believe that that's the person that we trust. And that's how Michelle Wu feels about it. She says, kill the babies, kill them all, kill them at any stage for any reason. That's her position. And yet we're supposed to take her seriously when she says that the loss of human life is always a tragedy. Always. There's a big asterisk on always there. You know, there's quite a qualifier on always, because when she says always, all human life, she means all human life except for the millions upon millions of unborn humans who have been slaughtered systematically for the last many decades in this country. Speaking of which, Casey Anthony has reemerged for some reason and kind of doing a bit of a rebrand here. And she had an announcement the other day about her new career path and her career goals. Let's hear it.
The whole point of this is for me to begin to reintroduce myself. I'm doing this both personally for me, but in a professional capacity. Moving forward, the majority of what you will see will be me speaking in a professional capacity. My goal is to continue to help give a voice to people, to give people tools and resources that they can utilize so they actually know where they can turn to. So with that, please join me on Substack. If you have questions, I will set up an email address where we can correspond directly. Up until this point, that has never happened. And it's only going to be on a limited basis regarding legal issues, legal matters. One of the main reasons that I'm doing this, there are people close to me who have been targeted and attacked recently. There are also people close to me who have had some recent things occur. And when necessary, people needed to step up, myself included. So as a proponent for the LGBTQ community, for our legal community, women's rights, I feel that it's important that I use this platform that was thrust upon me and now look at as a blessing as opposed to the curse that it has been since 2008.
She wants to use her platform as a blessing. She wants to see it as a blessing. And just to be totally clear about this, her, as you're probably aware, her platform exists because her daughter died. And her young daughter didn't just die. Her daughter was killed by Casey Anthony, in my opinion. It is my opinion and the opinion of millions of other people, the opinion of anyone who's looked at the evidence and has eyes, that she's guilty. I mean, she was acquitted, yes, but acquitted doesn't mean innocent. I mean, she's as innocent as O.J. Simpson was. I'll put it that way. I mean, this is a woman who actually had a Google search for foolproof suffocation. Foolproof suffocation methods was a Google search in her browser history. Somebody made that search on her computer on the last day that her daughter was seen alive. That's just one of the many, many pieces of evidence. They found traces of chloroform in the trunk of her car, along with her daughter's hair, and traces of human decomposition. So, again, there were many pieces of evidence, and it's obscene that she's walking free, but she is. And now she's rebranding herself as an LGBTQ and women's rights advocate. And needless to say, the LGBTQ camp and the feminists, you guys can have her. She's yours. She's on your team. Congratulations. And frankly, and I say this not as a joke at all, because I wouldn't joke about something as horrifying as this, that her history makes her perfectly qualified for, for that team, because the Democrat Party is the party of baby killers. And Casey Anthony sadly fits right in. Okay, let's brighten the mood a little bit. You've almost certainly seen this by now, but I did want to talk about it briefly. It's right up my alley in many ways. So Kieran Culkin won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor on Sunday for his role in a movie called A Real Pain, which I saw. I saw that movie. I think I saw 3 or 4 of the Oscar-nominated films this year, which is a record for me. At least it's in recent times, in the last couple of decades, that's a record for me. And so I saw that movie. It's about Kieran Culkin and Jesse Eisenberg, their characters touring Poland in honor of their grandmother who had just died and was a Holocaust survivor. And the movie is fine. It's a fine movie. I didn't think it was great. I don't think anyone watched the movie and go, that was a great film. But it wasn't bad. Culkin's performance was pretty good. He's a good actor. He was great in Succession. If the movie business, if the film industry was in good shape, it's not the kind of movie that would win awards because it's just like fine. You give it a solid B-. You give it a 82% on the report card, but kind of by default, it ends up winning some awards. Anyway, he's gotten a lot of attention over the last day because of this moment from his acceptance speech. And in case you haven't seen it, let's watch.
This is, I have to thank my wife, Jess, for absolutely everything, for giving my favorite people in the world. This is, please don't play the music, because I want to tell a really quick story about Jess. About a year ago, I was on a stage like this, and I very stupidly, publicly said that I want a third kid from her, because she said if I won the award, she would give me the kid. It turns out she said that because she didn't think I was going to win. And people came up to her and were like, really annoying her. I think it got to her. But anyway, after the show, we're walking through a parking lot. She's holding Emmy. We're trying to find our car. Emily, you were there, so you're a witness. And she goes, "Oh, God, I did say that. I guess I owe you a third kid." And I turned to her and I said, "Really, I want 4. And she turned to me. I swear to God this happened. It was just over a year ago. She said, "I will give you 4 when you win an Oscar." I held my hand out. She shook it, and I have not brought it up once until just now. You remember that, honey? You do? Okay. Then I just have this to say to you, Jazz. Love of my life, ye of little faith. No pressure. I love you. I'm really sorry I did this again. And let's get cracking on those kids. What do you say?
So it's a great moment, very pro-family. A man who not only wants kids, but actually wants an above-average number of kids, if you can imagine. And we're just not used to seeing that kind of thing from Hollywood. On the other hand, the fact that this is so notable and encouraging is, it's kind of a sad statement in itself. It should not be shocking that a man wants a bunch of kids. Especially shouldn't be shocking that a wealthy man wants a bunch of kids. Not that you need to be wealthy to have a lot of kids. You definitely don't, so don't get me wrong. But if you are rich, then there's really nothing stopping you. You don't need to worry at all about how you're going to afford it. So why wouldn't you? I mean, why wouldn't you have a boatload of kids? And again, that's really true regardless of your income level. And also, objectively, it is just great having a large family. It's a great thing. I know it won't surprise you to hear me say that. I'm certainly biased with 6 of my own, but it is great. You should have a lot of kids if you can. If you have a few, you should have more. If you have no kids, well, get to work because it is great. And I was thinking about this the other day. Well, I think about it all the time, of course, but the other day when I came home from work and my 5-year-old daughter was sitting at the kitchen counter and she was coloring one of her princess coloring books or whatever. And then when I came in, she hopped down off of the stool and ran over and jumped into my arms. And then my 8-year-old son was in the other room playing with his action figures. And my 11-year-old son was outside shooting his bow and arrow. And my 11-year-old daughter was upstairs reading. And my 2-year-old twins were riding their plastic cars around the house because we let them ride it around the house and they've totally scratched up the floors, but it's fine. So there was just so much life. It was just so much life in the house, and it's an incredible thing. How could it not bring you joy? How could it not be anyone's goal? And I've had it both ways. I've come home to an empty house, and I've come home to one full of energy and life and love, and I am so much happier with the second option. I'm just so much happier. It's so much better. It's so much better in every way. I cannot recommend it highly enough. So Kieran Culkin has the right idea. And you think about the comparison. Megan Basham made this point on X when this video went viral, that think about the comparison between this video of him saying, hey, let's have more kids, and the Hollywood actresses who credit their abortions with their success. I think she mentioned the one, Michelle Williams, I think, was one back a couple of years ago. It was either at the Oscars or the Golden Globes, and she got up there and talked about how, getting an abortion, she wouldn't have been able to do this without having gotten an abortion. Which is the more heartwarming story, okay? I don't care where you stand politically. I don't care what your position on abortion is. It's what's more heartwarming, what's more encouraging. To hear someone say, hey, let's have more babies, this is great, or to hear someone say, well, I'm glad that I killed my child because otherwise I wouldn't have had the success. And this is also kind of a rebuke, and I don't think he intended it to be a rebuke. I don't know what his own politics are. I assume he's probably liberal because he's in Hollywood, but it stands as a rebuke of Michelle Williams, because Michelle Williams says, well, I wouldn't have been able to do this without having a bunch of kids, without having killed my kid. If I had kids, I wouldn't have been able to accomplish all this. And then you see people who did accomplish the same thing or more, and they have kids. So it is actually possible. All right, there are two subjects we discussed prominently last week for some reason, and that would be Joy Reid and Lord of the Rings. And now those two have come together in a strange way. So I feel like I have to make mention of it. It's actually kind of bizarre. You know, I was ranting about both separately last week, and now they've come together in one story. What are the chances of that? So Joy Reid over the weekend posted on Blue Sky, which is the little social media app where the left goes and talks to themselves. And here's what she posted. She posted this. We will never be a monarchy. Know that. To quote the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king. Yes, the Lord of the Rings, famously the anti-monarchist screed, the Lord of the Rings. That's why the third book in the trilogy is called, The Return of the Democratically Elected President who will serve for 4 years and then be done at the conclusion of his term, right? Remember that book? When they made it a movie, that was a good one. And as everyone knows, at the end of that book and movie, Aragorn, he shows up to claim his crown, and they're like, sorry, Aragorn, we're a democracy now. So then Aragorn he says, oh, okay, oh man. So he has to launch a campaign, and he takes on Legolas as his campaign manager, and Frodo is his spokesman. And there's a series of debates, and eventually Aragorn is elected with a narrow electoral college victory. But then he's defeated when he runs for re-election by the dwarf guy, by Gimli, which was a big moment for Gondor because it was their first dwarf elected to national political office, kind of a breaking the glass ceiling there. It was a weird end to the book, to be honest. Explains why it's so long. Or maybe none of that actually happened. Maybe if Joy Reid had checked, not even, because when she tweeted this, a lot of people said, well, if you actually watch the movie or read the book, you don't even need to do that. Just look at the titles. At least check the titles. Because the third movie is in fact called The Return of the King. Because it turns out that Gondor not only gets a king, but part of the whole point is that it did need one. That's like a key point in the whole story, is that it in fact did need a king. It was his destiny to be the king. And in fact, the quote, Gondor needs no king, is from Boromir. And in the movie, when he says that phrase, there's ominous music playing in the background, which is a signal that we're not supposed to agree with it, right? This is not supposed to be an inspirational moment. And that's because he said that before betraying his friends and trying to seize the ring for himself. And that is the character that Joy Reid apparently identifies with, which, of course, is no surprise. And this is what happens. Joy Reid is so dumb that she has me doing the nerdy fact check, okay? She has me, like, pushing up my glasses, Well, actually, Aragorn did become the rightful ruler of the kingdom of Gondor. Actually, when I'm the one calling you out for butchering the mythology, then you screwed up big time. So that's Joy Reid. I was worried. As you know, last week, I was very worried that the end of her show would mean that her stupidity could no longer be content for my show. And we're, a week later, and she's back in the show. And so I think we're going to be fine, guys. I think we're going to be okay. Let's get to the comment section.
You're a man, it's required that you grow a beard. Hey, we're the sweet baby gang.
You know what's fascinating? When your metabolism is working properly, you feel the benefits in literally every aspect of your life. I've discovered myself an incredible tool that gives me insights to create a healthy metabolism for my body. It's called Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It measures your metabolism through your breath, and the app tells you if you're burning fat or carbs. It then provides personalized guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. Using it couldn't be simpler. I breathe in my Lumen first thing in the morning to understand my metabolism and get a personalized nutrition plan for the day. I can also check before and after workouts and meals to know exactly what's happening in my body in real time. Here's why it matters. Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns food into fuel. When it's optimized, you'll experience better energy levels, improved fitness results, and even better sleep. Lumen gives you all the recommendations you need to improve your metabolic health, helping you make informed decisions about your nutrition and lifestyle. Take the next step to improve your health. Go to lumen.me/Walsh to get 20% off your Lumen. That's lumen.me/Walsh for 20% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. The snub of Am I Racist will go down as the greatest snub in Oscars history. Yeah. Well, I mean, Stanley Kubrick and Alfred Hitchcock never won Oscars, and I would say that my snub was greater. You know, I think we can all agree with that. Or maybe not, because it's hard to call Am I Racist actually a snub, considering that it never had a real chance at all. It was never really in the running. I mean, it should have been, but in actuality, there was never any chance. Because obviously they're going to give the best documentary to whichever documentary was most politically acceptable to the Academy voters. There was just zero chance of it working out any other way. But by all rights, we should have been nominated. So even if it's not the greatest snub, even if it's not quite, even if it doesn't quite beat Kubrick and Hitchcock, it's still a snub. Let's see, another comment says, you're terrified of losing Trumpy subscribers too, aren't you? There goes your intellectual integrity. Well, I assume this comment is about my take on Zelensky, which is funny because I've had the same take on Ukraine and Zelensky since day one. Since day one of this story and the invasion, I've been saying basically the same thing. So there's no history of me kind of calibrating, of me triangulating, trying to figure out, where Trump is, where MAGA is, and I'll decide what. It's not the case. I've had the same take the entire time. But this is, yet again, obviously, just impugning my motives rather than addressing the point, which is all that political debate on the internet ever is now. It's just that. It's always, we've talked about this. It's always now, which is the laziest form of argument. It's the laziest and most useless form of argument, because there's no way to really respond to it. When you say, well, you're only saying that because of this. Well, there's no way, what you're trying to do is read my mind, and there's no way for me to, I'm the only one with access to my mind, and so the only evidence of what I'm really thinking is just what I say about what I'm thinking. You kind of got to take that or leave it. But it also doesn't matter. Whatever my motives are for saying it, it doesn't really matter. What matters is it true or not. That's what should concern us. Zelensky is severely underdressed for the meeting, but he's still not as ridiculous looking as John Fetterman. Oh, definitely. I completely agree. Well, the hoodie thing, because he walks around in hoodies and gym shorts. And he's an American. So I would expect him to have more respect for our customs and for the office that he occupies. Matt, I've always admired you, but if you're prepared to label a man who's doing his best to preserve his people and his country a welfare queen because he asks for help in the face of cruel, violent, murderous aggression, then my admiration is severely diminished. I had thought you an honorable man. Well, I must not be. I mean, how could I be an honorable man and disagree with you? My honor depends entirely on agreeing with you about everything, it turns out. And so, yes, then I guess I'm not honorable. Look, you can think whatever you want of me. It doesn't matter to me. Zelensky cares about his country. Great. I don't hold that against him. I care about mine. And what I know is that he, Zelensky, is not only demanding and taking hundreds of billions of dollars out of the pockets of American citizens, but he is trying to pull us into a war that could easily turn into a global conflict that ends in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans. That's what I know. So yeah, I'm going to have unkind things to say about somebody like that. because my priority is my country. I understand it's not his priority. I don't expect it to be. I expect his priority to be Ukraine. But my priority is America. And when he comes over here and tells us that we should prioritize his country, even though he doesn't give a damn about ours, that I take exception to. And when that's your position, you're only going to get contempt from me. That's all you're getting. I won't even dignify that with anything else other than contempt. When you come from another country, you're a foreigner, and you come here and you dare to say, well, this is what you owe us. You should care about us. Well, what the hell? What has Zelensky ever done for America? What has Zelensky ever done for America, for Americans? When has he ever demonstrated the slightest concern ever in his entire life? What? Can you give me one example? One time? No, but because you want it to always be one. It's supposed to always be one-sided. We're supposed to care about every other country and go to war to protect them and spend billions and trillions of dollars on all these other people. We never expect to see, but we're never supposed to get anything in return, ever. We are supposed to value the citizens of other countries in ways that those same citizens and the leaders of those countries don't value us. We are supposed to carry this expectation and this burden that no one has ever carried. It's never worked this way for anyone ever. It's like you care about your own country and the welfare and safety of your own country and your own countrymen. That's how it's always worked. Except for modern America specifically. We're supposed to be the only ones who value everyone equally, or in fact value foreigners even more than we value our own people. And I just don't. So, no, I don't want to see a single American life lost in defense of Ukraine. And I would rather see Ukraine conquered. I would rather see it cease to exist as a political entity than see a single American die over it. Like, definitely. I mean, of course. And that should be the position of every single American. That's a completely rational position. Tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern, President Donald Trump addresses Congress. A moment this big demands coverage that actually rises to the occasion. That's exactly what we're delivering. For the first time ever, Ben Shapiro and myself will be live from D.C. covering Trump's address from the nation's capital. This is a connection between the Daily Wire and presidential administration like never before. This isn't just coverage of the event. It's coverage from where it's happening. It all kicks off with our exclusive pre-show at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Daily Wire Plus, setting the stage for Trump's address. Then watch history unfold live with us only on Daily Wire Plus. Don't go anywhere afterwards. It's Backstage Live, breaking down what it all means for America's future. This is coverage the media won't give you. Watch it all tonight exclusively on Daily Wire Plus. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. It probably won't come as much of a shock for you to learn that I did not see and have no plans to see the film Anora, which apparently won Best Picture at the Oscars the other day. This is a film that was pretty low on my radar for obvious reasons, and if we're being honest, it was low on the Academy's radar too. In all likelihood, it was their backup plan, kind of their plan B for Best Picture after the lead actor and Emilia Perez summarily took that film out of consideration by bad-mouthing the patron saint of violent, drug-addicted felons who assault women and try to rob convenience stores. After that whole debacle, the Academy presumably had to spend a few days looking through the old tweets of everybody in the cast of Anora just to make sure that they, too, didn't make the mistake of besmirching the good name of St. George Floyd. And then when the background check came back clear, they decided to just go with that. So if you're not familiar with Anora, because like everyone else in the country, you've never seen it, here's the synopsis. It's a tragic comedy about a prostitute, or sex worker, as the euphemism goes, who's hired by the son of a Russian oligarch who lives in a waterfront mansion. And then after they party for a while and do other things, I suppose, they elope. There's a lot of scenes along the way that can be fairly described as pornographic in nature, as you might imagine. In fact, that's most of the film. And then, spoiler alert, the marriage doesn't end well. Somehow the sudden union of a prostitute with the son of a Russian oligarch wasn't meant to be. Doesn't work out great. So Anora is cast aside, to her great shock and dismay. And then there's some drama with some Armenian henchmen who kidnap the prostitute and tie her up and gag her and offer her $10,000 to annul the marriage, which is only natural in a situation like this. I mean, who among us hasn't been kidnapped by Armenian henchmen after our impromptu marriages with the sons of Russian oligarchs goes south? Relatable stuff we're talking about. And then it gets even more relatable when one of the Armenian thugs develops some affection for the prostitute, and the film ends with her trying to have sex with him, but then She changes her mind and begins crying because, of course, affection is difficult under those circumstances, circumstances that are rather emotionally fraught, and sort of that's the end. So for the record, if there are any inaccuracies in my synopsis that I just recited, you should know that, very honestly, I don't care. This film is one of the lowest grossing Best Picture winners in the history of the Oscars. So the odds are pretty low that anyone's going to call me out on it because no one's seen it, even if I'm wrong about something. The larger point is that at the Oscars, this film became a rallying cry for prostitutes. Actors and actresses, along with many others who are associated with this film, went out of their way to make this point as explicit as possible. Here, for example, is the star of the film, Mikey Madison, explaining that she wants to, quote, honor the sex worker community. Watch.
Also, thank you to Kennedy Schneider. Thank you to our incredible consultants. I also just want to again recognize and honor the sex worker community. I will continue to support and be an ally. All of the incredible people, the women that I've had the privilege of meeting from that community has been one of the highlights of this entire incredible experience.
Big cheer for prostitutes there. So she begins by praising the incredible consultants involved in the film, and then she expresses her affection for the so-called sex worker community as if they're two distinct categories. Apparently, in this one moment, we're meant to assume that consultants are morally distinct in some way from prostitutes. Personally, I don't know what's worse, to be a prostitute or a consultant, or a prostitute consultant. I mean, that combines two of the most disreputable professions into one. And then we're supposed to conclude that it's important to be a, quote, ally of the sex worker community, which is a statement that's so demented that you'd probably be embarrassed to even joke about it in private. But at the Oscars, which were broadcast to literally hundreds of viewers, it was an applause line. Yes, the message from this year's Academy Awards is that we're supposed to be allies to prostitutes. We're supposed to watch about 2 hours of softcore pornography, which is the film, and conclude that we're on the prostitute side. That's supposed to be the brave stand that we take after watching this film. That's the grand message they wanted to communicate to make us all enlightened. And of course, every pathetic, sex-starved, lonely man on the planet is more than happy to demonstrate his allyship to hookers. And those men don't need a film to make them think that way. But just in case they need it, Anora is currently available to rent on the internet for about $5. And things somehow get even creepier when you realize that the director of this film, Sean Baker, has pretty much spent his entire career making films about prostitutes. He's directed at least 5 films about prostitutes by my count. And when he's asked about this, he said that his goal is to legalize prostitution for reasons that he wasn't exactly clear about, but that's his goal.
I've been pretty outspoken about my stance on sex work. It's our oldest profession, yet it has an incredible unfair stigma applied to it. And what I've been trying to do with my films is sort of chip away at that very unfair stigma. Personally, I think it should be decriminalized, and I guess through my work, through hopefully humanizing my characters that are usually seen as perhaps caricatures in most film and television, it will help do that.
This is a guy who just won 4 Oscars for this film. He won for the original screenplay, film editing, directing, and Best Picture, all for a single film about how important it is to legalize prostitution. If you're keeping track, that sets a record for most Oscars won by a single person for one film. Walt Disney didn't even do that. Walt Disney apparently won 4 Oscars in one night, but not for the same movie. So this is how the Academy is making history. They couldn't give the Best Actress award to a man because that man was not a fan of George Floyd. So instead of doing that, they'll shower the porno film with awards instead. Now, you'll see various conservative commentators online defending Anora and saying that it's actually critical of prostitution. And they'll point to the fact that in the film, the prostitute is obviously broken and unhappy by the end of it. And that may be true if Wikipedia's synopsis is to be believed. But the actual point of the film, according to the people who made it, who I think are probably authorities on the subject, is that we need to sympathize more with these prostitutes and legalize what they're doing. I mean, that is their motivation. And in that light, it's clear that Anora isn't really a film so much as part of a broader campaign to normalize and celebrate prostitution. It's not really a movie that's supposed to impress you with its plot or characters or anything like that. It's a political statement. In fact, it's as explicit a political statement as it could possibly be. The problem is that the leftists who campaign to humanize sex workers, as we heard from Mikey Madison use those words, when they say that, they have it only half right. Yes, we should humanize them. I mean, they are human beings, and their human dignity should be respected. But the way we humanize and ultimately help quote-unquote sex workers is to condemn, prohibit, and abolish quote-unquote sex work. You cannot legitimize prostitution while at the same time trying to be an ally to prostitutes. The way to be an ally, to help them, is to delegitimize prostitution and to drive it out of polite society and as far back onto the fringes as we can possibly get it. You hear this slogan, sex work is real work, all the time, and that is a slogan that you champion if you're trying to convince women to remain prostitutes forever. You know, it's like saying that a drug habit is a habit just as legitimate as the habit of gardening or stamp collecting. When you say that, you're not helping alcoholics. You're abandoning them. You are consigning them to a life of misery and failure. The people who made Anora wouldn't win an Oscar with that kind of message, of course, but it's obviously the right one, which is why no one bothered to see this film in the first place. And that is why Anora is today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
President Trump has officially paused all American military aid to Ukraine. RFK Jr. is accused of flip-flopping on the measles vaccine. And Casey Anthony resurfaces to fight for women's rights. Very fitting. Check it out on The Michael Knowles Show.